Hello, movie lovers. Welcome to my podcast. My name is Lowell Reynolds, and this is Lowell Loves Movies, where we talk about movies, review movies, discuss movie news, talk about beloved classics, and what's on the horizon. So sit back, relax, get your popcorn out, pour yourself a glass of cognac, and let's talk movies. 15 years after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Harrison Ford dons the hat and the whip once again as the famous archaeologist Indiana Jones in his fifth and final adventure, The Dial of Destiny. Now, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was released in theaters last week, and I saw it at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood at a fan event, and I saw it again today. I've already seen it twice. It's been in theaters for a week now, and everybody who's seen it is sharing their thoughts, and I thought I'd share my thoughts. So, a little bit of a background. I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. I've loved these movies ever since I was a kid when I watched them. I remember I was 13 years old when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out. And before it came out, I wanted to watch all three of the original Indiana Jones movies before I saw it. And at that time, I was already a huge Star Wars fan, and I was a big fan of George Lucas. And when I found out he created another franchise called Indiana Jones, obviously I was curious about it. And I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade on DVD 3 weeks in a row before I saw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I just fell in love with these movies. These movies just absolutely captivated my imagination. They were funny, they were action-packed, they had drama, they had supernatural stuff, they had Nazis getting their faces melted off by spirits, they had voodoo, they had the Holy Grail, they had a little bit of everything. You know, it was just, they were just so much fun to watch. And I remember seeing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in theaters when it came out. And it's funny, when I saw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. But I had no idea that it was one of the most hated movies of all time on the internet at the time. I was shocked to find people saying it was like the worst thing ever and all that. But yeah, as time went on, of course, I started to understand the criticisms of Crystal Skull, and I acknowledge it's not a perfect movie. In fact, it's probably not even a great movie, but, you know, it's not that bad. It's fine. But yeah, nowhere near as good as the original trilogy, obviously. But overall, I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones, and I've always wanted them to make another one. I mean, I know people complained that Harrison Ford was getting too old and there's not much story left to tell, but the thing is, Harrison Ford clearly loves the character of Indiana Jones. I mean, he loves Indiana Jones in a way I don't think I've ever seen him love another character he's played. Even Han Solo, like, we all know he's very indifferent to Han Solo in Star Wars. He was reluctant to come back, but Indiana Jones, that's like his baby. Like, Harrison Ford, back in the 90s, they asked him, would you ever play Indiana Jones again? And he said, in a New York Minute. And I thought to myself, well, if Harrison Ford wants to do another Indiana Jones movie, hell yeah, I'll go see it. And after 15 years of waiting, they finally released it in theaters. And speaking for me personally, I really enjoyed it. I mean, Now look, the movie has its flaws. It's not perfect. There are moments where it drags on a little bit. Some of the writing is a little sloppy. There's some plot points that don't get resolved. And yeah, overall, just like Crystal Skull, it can't help but feel like an unnecessary sequel. But overall, the stuff that was good was really good in my opinion. Harrison Ford came to play. He gives one of the best performances in a long time, I think. You can just feel the passion he has for the character in this. He's an older, more disgruntled Indiana Jones than we've seen. In a lot of ways, this kind of reminded me of Rocky Balboa, because that was also a sequel where this hero who's iconic has been through so much, and now he's old, near the end of his life, his career, and he's just kind of reflecting on all of his triumphs, all of his mistakes, and where he wants to go from here. What does he want his legacy to be? It was like that. It was like the Rocky Balboa of Indiana Jones. And I do think that that's part of the reason this has gotten kind of a divisive reaction from critics and audiences and indie fans, because the Indiana Jones movies have always been escapism. They've always been kind of about forgetting about the real world for a couple of years, for a couple of hours. So to watch a movie where your hero is old and near the end of his life, yeah, I could see why people would be put off by that, and I understand, I get it, but for me personally, I love delving into a character. I love exploring a character. I'm kind of interested in seeing a character get older near the end of their career. I like seeing a character be reflective. For me, it was an interesting character study. It was a very human portrayal of Indiana Jones, you know, and it kind of reminded me of The Last Jedi and how it handled Luke. Like, again, that was taking a beloved hero that has meant so much to so many people and was a huge part of people's childhoods, and making him, instead of treating him like a legend, they treat him like a man, a human being with flaws, who's made mistakes, who's not exactly the same as he used to be. And again, I can see why that would put some people off, you know, but for me personally, I guess I just look at it differently. Like, I just look at it as, you know, I'm seeing an old friend again. Things aren't quite the same as they used to be, but overall, I'm just happy to see them again. And, you know, I hope things turn out well for them. And it was really interesting to see Indiana Jones at this old age. Like, in the movie, he's 70, even though Harrison Ford is like 80, but he's near the end of his career. He's teaching history in the year 1969, the day after America lands a man on the moon. So at that time, everybody's thinking about the future. Everybody's thinking forward. Nobody really cares about the past or history at that time. And Indy is stuck in the past, literally. Like, he cannot move on from the old days or the glory days or things that he's, you know, and it's like a fish out of water tale in a way. It's a hero who's way past his time, and I really liked seeing him in this light. It was a very human depiction, I think, and it's not going to work for everybody, but it worked for me. And he's also joined by his goddaughter Helena, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who, I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I think she's really funny. I thought she was really good in this role. I liked her chemistry with Harrison Ford. And I thought she was a good character for the most part. My problem with her character, Helena, is that she was a little too snarky at times, a little too mean. Like, she's way too mean to Indiana Jones at some points. Like, you get the sense that she doesn't really respect him that much, and she's, you know, obsessed with money and she's greedy. And, you know, look, the thing is, the Indiana Jones movies, the characters are snarky. I mean, Indiana Jones is snarky, Marion Ravenwood was snarky, I get it, but even then, like in the original trilogy, you always had this sense that, you know, Indy and his friends, they really cared for each other. You know, they loved each other. Like in Temple of Doom, as dark and as batshit as it got, you know, as, you know, depressing and dark and gloomy as it was, you still had Indy and Short Round. You had that tender relationship they had, that father-son dynamic, you know. You had Short Round hugging Indy. You got the sense that they really cared for each other. And Last Crusade, even though Indy and his dad got on each other's nerves, even though he's mad at his dad for leaving him as a kid and not spending much time with him and all that. Well, okay, he didn't leave him as a kid, but like, even though Indy's mad at his dad for, you know, not paying much attention to him as a kid, and his dad is just hard to please, even then, you still got that sense that they loved each other, that they had this deep love for one another. Like, when Indy risks his life to save his dad using the Holy Grail, and then he tries to reach for the Grail, and his dad stops him, and he makes it clear to him that he doesn't have to try to make him proud anymore. He's already proud of him. It's just such a great dynamic, such a great relationship. And again, even Crystal Skull, whatever you think of that movie, you really got the sense that Indy and his son, even though they were kind of at odds with each other, you bought their relationship. You bought their chemistry. You bought that, you know, they had a bit of respect for each other. And then when he finds out he's his son, he's mad at him, and his son's mad at him. But even then, you still got that sense that they cared for each other. And I just never got that with Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character and Indy in this. I never got the sense that she cared for him and that he cared for her. Like, to me, she came across as snarky and mean and full of herself. And, you know, again, I like those kinds of characters, but I don't know. I don't know if it's the writing or the directing, but I don't know. I feel like that's another thing. I think with the writing, I think if this movie had just a couple more rewrites, I think this could have been great. Another character, there's this little kid, I forgot his name, probably not a great sign that I can't remember his name, who's kind of like Short Round, but not nearly as memorable. Like, I don't remember many lines he said, but the actor who plays him is fine. He's got a lot of energy, and he complains about everything, and he's resourceful. He's a pretty decent sidekick. The villain of the movie, played by Mads Mikkelsen, I can't remember the character's name, but I heard he's based on a real guy. He was a great villain. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen, it kind of feels like he was born to play an Indiana Jones villain, honestly. Like, he steals every scene he's in, and he is so threatening and intimidating. And the Indiana Jones movies always have a great villain, I think. And when it comes to villains, you don't get much better or worse than the Nazis. And that's another interesting thing I liked about the movie, is that they brought back the Nazis. Like, when people talk about what their favorite Indiana Jones movie is, it usually comes down to Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. And one thing those two movies have in common is that he's going up against the Nazis, because they take place in the 1930s. And he's trying to find these legendary artifacts that contain this special power before the Nazis do. And that's the conflict. And King of the Crystal Skull took place in the 50s, so the villains in that movie were the communists, the Russians. And a lot of indie fans weren't thrilled about that, because even though it was historically accurate and it was the next logical step, it just didn't feel the same. You know, Indy is at his best when he's fighting the Nazis. And I like that they brought back the Nazis. Even though it takes place in the 60s, the villains of the movie are these quote-unquote ex-Nazis who work for NASA, because apparently during the space race, the American government hired ex-Nazi scientists to work at NASA to help them land on the moon before the communists did. And I really like that this movie decided to make those guys the villains. And, honestly, it kind of feels a little topical because the message, the overall message of that is World War II might be over, but there's still Nazis around, and they're even working in the U.S. government. God, Did I say this movie was about escapism and forgetting about the world for a couple hours? My bad. But seriously, though, even with all that, it's still a really fun, entertaining movie, in my opinion. Like I said, it kind of drags at times. That's another thing about the Indiana Jones movies is especially the original three, those movies had such a tight script. Those movies, even no matter how long they were, they didn't feel long. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think is at least 2 hours long, but whenever I watch it, it doesn't feel long. Like it feels like it just moves so smoothly from scene to scene to scene. Like there's fast-paced action scenes, obviously. There's a lot of action, but even the moments where they're talking, it feels important to the story. Like everything's moving along, chugging along. And even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, as flawed as it was and as bad as it might have been, it did have a flowing narrative. It moved smoothly from one scene to the next. Where Dial of Destiny, I feel like it kind of drags on, especially near the end. And it should probably be mentioned that this is the first Indiana Jones movie not directed by Steven Spielberg or produced by George Lucas. Steven Spielberg directed all 4 of the previous Indiana Jones movies, with George Lucas serving as the executive producer and the guy who wrote the basic storyline. And I feel like with Spielberg and Lucas, I feel like there's something about Spielberg, like he just knew how to get the plot moving, how to direct these great set pieces, these great action sequences. And James Mangold, I think, does a solid job with this. I think he does a solid job directing the action and the acting and all that. But I do feel like the movie was kind of missing that Spielberg touch. I feel like it was missing that Spielberg magic mixed with the crazy imagination of George Lucas, except for the third act, which I'm going to get into spoilers pretty soon. Just a heads up. In a little bit, I'm going to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, I advise that you stop listening right now, or I'll tell you when you can stop listening, but yeah, I'm going to get into spoilers pretty soon. But anyways, so yeah, those are some of the problems I have with the movie, is it lacks some of the heart of the other 4, directed by Spielberg and made by Lucas. It doesn't have the same fast pacing as the other movies, and it doesn't even have the same originality as those movies. So why did I like it? Well, again, I love seeing Harrison Ford again as Indiana Jones, and I think he gives a great performance. I like the themes of the movie. It's commentary, not just on Indiana Jones, but I feel like it's a commentary on a lot of Hollywood movies today. Like, there seems to be a trend in Hollywood where they're making these sequels to these beloved properties from decades ago, like Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, blah, 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 and they seem to rely on nostalgia. Like, right now, our culture seems very fixated on nostalgia and reliving the old days. And I like that this movie, even though it is a nostalgic sequel, even though it is a sequel to a beloved IP that a lot of people have fond memories of, this sequel is all about letting go, all about moving on from the past and the dangers of nostalgia and why we can't go back. We can't just relive the old days. We have to live in the now. That's a very important message, and it's not a message I would expect from a blockbuster, including one from Indiana Jones. I mean, yeah, you could argue Last Crusade kind of had that same message with, you know, his dad saying, Indiana, let it go. But still, I think it was very interesting that even though, yeah, this movie had a lot of nostalgic comebacks, a lot of nostalgic callbacks, and fan service, it felt like it didn't rely on that. It felt like it used that, it didn't rely on it as a crutch, it used it as a way to tell an interesting story. And I also really loved, of course, I loved John Williams' music. John Williams, of course, did the music for all the Indiana Jones movies. John Williams, in my opinion, can do no wrong. You give that guy, you tell that guy to score a movie, he's going to give you something absolutely beautiful to listen to. Fun fact, as I'm recording this, I just left seeing John Williams perform at the Hollywood Bowl, and it's an incredible show. He does it every year at the Hollywood Bowl. If you're ever in California, if you're ever near the Hollywood Bowl, and John Williams happens to be performing, you have to go see it. I mean, John Williams, every year I go there, it's an incredible show. And the fact that John Williams is 91 years old, that he's like past the age of 90, and he's still working on movies, still doing concerts, still selling out shows, that's just incredible. John Williams is a real-life Jedi Master, in my opinion. Like, my God, John Williams is just amazing, and his score in this movie is incredible. I mean, I always get goosebumps, chills whenever I hear the classic Indiana Jones theme, and I've had the Indiana Jones theme stuck in my head all week long. Not that I'm complaining at all. I'm not. I'm happy that I have that theme in my head. And there's a lot of great new music. Helena, Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, has her own theme, Helena's theme. It's kind of a throwback to the classic Hollywood music, film noir, which Indiana Jones took a lot of inspiration from. And another thing I loved about the movie, I really loved the opening sequence where it's a flashback to Indy in the 1940s, and he's fighting the Nazis right when they're near the end of their power. And they have this technology where they de-aged Harrison Ford to make him look younger. They make him look like he did in the 80s, which that's the same kind of technology, by the way, they used for Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian. And a lot of people are mixed on that technique. I mean, some people think it's unnecessary, like, why don't you just recast them? And I can see that, but for me personally, when it comes to this, I thought it was fine. I think they did a really solid job making Harrison Ford look younger, and I thought it was just a great sequence overall. It was a little distracting when he talked, like, because he's supposed to look like he's in his 30s and 40s, but he sounds like he's 80 years old because he is. But still, it's a great sequence. There's like this fight on top of a train, which, again, we've seen before in Last Crusade. But still, like, something about that whole sequence when he's fighting the Nazis, when he's trying to get this treasure, like, it felt like watching the classic Indiana Jones movies. It really felt like a real Indiana Jones sequel. And, you know, the rest of the movie doesn't quite live up to the same high as that opening sequence, but it's still entertaining. And there's also a lot of great cameos. Like, it's not a spoiler that Sala shows up in this movie. He's in the trailer, and he says the line, "Give him hell, Indiana Jones." Such a great line. And he's not in the movie that much. He's only really in it just to deliver that line. Even though he says to Indy he wants to go with him, but Indy's like, "No, you stay here." But yeah, so yeah, I loved the beginning. I liked the middle, and I loved the ending. I thought the ending was great. I'm going to talk about it in the spoiler section. So yeah, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. My overall spoiler-free thoughts are: it's uneven, a bit of a mess, but really entertaining and a nice send-off to Indiana Jones. I say go see it. And now I'm going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I advise you stop watching, go see it, and then come back and listen to the rest of it. If you have already seen it, or you just don't care about seeing it, then stick around. But if you do care about spoilers, keep your ears shut. Don't listen to it, Marion. Keep your ears shut. Okay, so I could not believe that Indiana Jones found Han Solo frozen in carbonite. I know, I can't believe that Star Wars and Indiana Jones take place in the same universe. Oh my god. I'm just kidding. Actually, Indiana Jones finds the Millennium Falcon. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, now for real talk. Okay, so, now that I get into spoilers. So, the movie's ending, I think, is where this movie's really dividing people. Like, there's people who either love the ending and people who hate the ending. And I'm one of the people who loves the ending. And I will tell you why. So, the movie ends, of course, with Indy and his goddaughter Helena finding the Dial of Destiny in Greece. And, the Nazis catch up to them. And they shoot Indy in the chest. And even though he's wounded, they decide to take him with them as a hostage and tie him up, which, that didn't make any sense to me. Like, okay, you just shot an 80-year-old man in the chest. Okay, he's supposed to be 70, but you shot an old man in the chest, and you decide to take him along with you, and you have to tie him up. Why? He's wounded. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna get up? He's not gonna go anywhere. He's wounded. It's like, come on. But anyways, they take Indy on this plane, and they use the Dial of Destiny to turn back time, to open this portal to go back in time. And Matt Mikkelson's character wants to use the dial to go back in time to the year 1939 to help the Nazis win World War II. And he plans on doing this by killing Hitler. Now, we've all heard people talk about, would they kill Hitler? And most of the time people would say absolutely, but this is probably the first time I've ever heard a character talk about killing Hitler, and it's actually for evil reasons. Like, it's because he thinks he could do a better job than Hitler. That was very interesting. I think that made for an interesting twist. But he thinks he succeeded in going back in time. He does succeed in going back in time, but he doesn't go back to 1939. He goes back in time to the Syracuse War. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. He goes back in time to, like, 200 BC, around Archimedes' time. I'm going to have to read this later. My dad, fun fact, I saw the movie with my dad today, and he told me that back in college, when he majored in philosophy, he learned about Archimedes. So he found the Archimedes stuff very fascinating. So Indy and the ex-Nazi and Helena and the little kid, they all end up back in the Syracuse War, and these Roman soldiers at the bottom see these planes that are thousands of years in the future, and they think they're dragons because they have no frame of reference for what a plane is. They see this flying machine shooting bullets, and all they can think is dragon. And I know a lot of people are going to think this whole scene is stupid. I mean, again, a lot of indie fans hated the alien aspect of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because they argued that aliens don't belong in an Indiana Jones movie because the Indiana Jones movies have always been more about fantasy, or, fantasy elements, magic, superpowers, and all that. They've never been science fiction, and aliens are more science fiction. And I think that's the case with time travel in this movie, is it doesn't feel like fantasy, it feels more like science fiction. But for me personally, just like the aliens in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, even though, they're more sci-fi than fantasy, I personally thought they fit fine in the Indiana Jones movies, specifically for these two movies, because, I mean, if you look at the history of them, like the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, a a lot of historians believed that those crystal skulls were from aliens. And with the Dial of Destiny, I don't know enough about the Dial of Destiny or about Archimedes, but it seems like based on this movie, it's believed that it's an artifact that has the ability to turn back time. I find Indiana Jones going back in time to be ridiculously silly and over the top and cheesy, and I think that's why I loved it. I mean, for me, I guess it's because I look at the Indiana Jones movies differently than most people do. I mean, people have their criticisms of these movies, and they're valid, but sometimes I do feel like fans can take these movies a little too seriously, like, you know, oh, it doesn't make sense why this happened or why that happened. And I guess for me, I look at the Indiana Jones movies as they're an homage to classic cinema, to classic adventure serials from Steven Spielberg and George Lucas's youth. And those adventure serials were very cartoonish. They were very simple, very cheesy, very corny. They were pulpy. They were just very simple, good guy versus bad guy. Good guy finds himself in dangerous situations, always gets back on top, always beats the bad guy, always gets the girl, lives happily ever after. It was an adventure. It was fun. It was escapism. And they were made at a time during the Great Depression and World War II, back when audiences wanted escapism. They wanted to get away from the real world for a while. And that's what I've always seen the Indiana Jones movies as. These are entertainment. They're an adventure. It's fun. You're supposed to watch these movies and forget about the real world for a couple of hours. And personally, I love it when Indiana Jones gets cheesy. I love it when it gets over the top. I love it when it gets silly. To me, that's what makes it Indiana Jones. And that's the thing I love about a lot of George Lucas type movies, is they are unapologetically cheesy. It's kind of like pizza, you know? It's cheesy, but I love it. And Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, so they go back in time to Archimedes, and the Nazi dies by crashing the plane, and Indy initially wants to stay in the past, even though he's got a wound in his chest and he's dying. He wants to stay in the past with Archimedes to help give him the Dial of Destiny and figure out this problem and all that. But Helena insists that no, you gotta go back into the present, that's where you belong. And Indy's like, no, just let me die, just let me stay here. And Helena's like, okay. And then she punches him in the face. That got a huge laugh from the fan event. Like, we were just cracking up during that scene. She punches him in the face, pitch black, and then it fades in, and he's back at his apartment in New York City in 1969 with a cast on and everything and a bunch of medicine. And Indy is saying, what do I got to live for? Why'd you bring me back? I got nothing to live for. And then Marion comes back, and in the movie, they're separated. Like at the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they got married and they had a son played by Shia LaBeouf. But in this movie, they got separated because apparently Shia LaBeouf's character, Mutt Williams, enlisted in the Vietnam War and died in between movies, and it caused them a lot of grief, and it caused their marriage to fall apart, which is just heartbreaking. It's like, why can't you just let Indy have a happy ending, man? But, you know, Marion comes back, and she asks him, does it hurt? And he says, everything hurts. And she says, I know how it feels. And they recreate the iconic Where Does It Hurt scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first movie, when, you know, they're in that ship, and Indy's wounded, and Marion's tending to him, and she asks him, where does it hurt? He's all, here, and she kisses all of his wounds. And in Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's a very sexual scene. It's a very, like, sensual, romantic scene. And here, like, where in Raiders of the Lost Ark, she was kissing literal wounds from the beating he took in his adventure. Here, the wounds Marion's talking about are emotional wounds. The wounds from losing her son, which is a type of loss no parent should ever go through. And I just loved seeing them embrace in that moment. I loved seeing them reconcile with each other. And you really get the sense that Indy is finally content with just settling down and relaxing and retiring after all these adventures, because he's got the greatest treasure of all, love. Yeah, that's the message of the movie. And then, of course, Sallah takes the kids to get ice cream, and it ends kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon, you know, with the circle closing in on Indy's head. He grabs it, cuts to black, John Williams music plays, and that's how the movie ends. Personally, for me, what would have made the ending even better is if Short Round showed up. If Ke Huy Quan showed up as Short Round. Hell, the whole movie would have been better if they just brought Short Round back. Like, have Short Round be grown up. Have him go on this one last adventure with Indy. And then he takes on the mantle. He's the new main character. I guess at the time when they were making this, they were thinking, well, Ke Huy Quan doesn't have that much star power, so let's just cast someone else, and nobody's going to miss him. And then, of course, Ke Huy Quan won the Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Disney and Lucasfilm had egg on their face. They chose poorly. So yeah, Dial of Destiny, I think, is a great send-off to Indiana Jones' character. Could have been better, and ironically, even though it's a good send-off to his character, just like Crystal Skull, like I said, it feels unnecessary. I mean, The Last Crusade was about as perfect an ending as you could get for Indiana Jones. I mean, that whole movie was about him reconciling with his father, who was the first reason he had his whole obsession with archaeology in the first place. We find out that the whole reason he's obsessed with finding treasure is to impress his dad, because his dad was so obsessed with history. And he had this hole in his heart, this need, this void that he tried to fill. He tried to please his father. That's why he risked his life all these years. That's why he did all these crazy adventures and did all this crazy stuff and got into near-death situations, and because he wanted to find these treasures just to please his dad. And when he finds the ultimate treasure, the Holy Grail, the Cup of Christ, and he's trying to reach for it, his dad, the whole movie, he keeps calling him Junior as a way of disrespecting him, but then here he finally calls him by his real name, Indiana, and he says, let it go. That's probably the most emotional, the most moving scene in the entire Indiana Jones series, and it's such a great way to end that story, that character, that whole saga, really. I mean, Last Crusade, and then they ride off on horses into the sunset, literally. I mean, that was about as perfect an ending as you could get for that character. And I could see why Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny feel kind of like epilogues. They feel unnecessary. Like, there's not really a reason to make them except for money. And also George Lucas had a weird alien fixation for a while. But that's beside the point. In a way, Indiana Jones as a franchise reminds me of Toy Story. Like, both franchises had a great third movie that ended things perfectly, but the studios decided we want more money, so we gotta make another one and another one. And both the fourth and the fifth one keep saying, no, this is the last movie. No, this is the final movie. No, this is the farewell of the character. And, you know, I guess it all depends on, like, you know, if you wanted to see the character again, if you wanted to go on one more adventure, you know, like, I look at it as, yeah, I was fine with it ending with Last Crusade, but I am happy that I got to see Indiana Jones again on the big screen. Like, I never thought I would get to see Indiana Jones in a new adventure on the big screen again, played by Harrison Ford. So it was just a really nice treat just to see him again. I mean, this whole movie, just like Crystal Skull, the reason you watch it is for the nostalgia factor. It's a way of reminding you of a simpler time, but Dial of Destiny also uses it as an opportunity to be reflective, to make you, the audience, think and ponder. Is nostalgia a good thing? Is it possible to go back in time? No. You can only live in the present. How do you deal with that? And it's a reflective movie, it's a very human movie, and it's got good action. It's a fun adventure. Like, in the end of the day, that to me is what Indiana Jones is about. Adventure. It's about an experience, going on a crazy quest full of twists and turns with this one character, Indiana Jones. And you try to find this MacGuffin together. You learn something about each other. And you go in these near-death situations. You think you're not going to make it, and then you do make it. And you feel invincible. You feel like you can take on anything. And overall, you're glad you went on that adventure with them. And that's at least how I feel about it, about this movie and about this franchise. I'm always down for another Indiana Jones adventure, no matter what. And it seems like we're not going to get another adventure with Indiana Jones. This is it. This is the end. I mean, Harrison Ford has made it very clear this is his last time playing Indiana Jones, and honestly, I'm glad I got to have this one last adventure with him. And as for whether or not they should reboot the character, if they should recast him, I don't think so. I think that's a mistake. I think they should just leave this franchise alone, leave it in the past, just like Indy. And I know people use the James Bond argument because Indiana Jones was modeled after James Bond. He was started off as, kind of an homage to James Bond. And James Bond, of course, has been played by multiple actors. But here's the thing. The difference is James Bond started off as a character in a book series written by Ian Fleming. That was a character in a book. So the fans, the readers of that book, had their own idea of what James Bond should be, and that's why we're more willing to see other actors play him. But with Indiana Jones, he was created by George Lucas, who also created Star Wars, and worked with Harrison Ford on Star Wars and American Graffiti. George Lucas and Spielberg both know this character in and out, and they cast Harrison Ford at the beginning. And to me, that's the difference, is that was what made the Indiana Jones franchise so special, is it wasn't just a series of action movies with this one guy. You were seeing Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, these two filmmakers, these influential filmmakers at the top of their powers, working together to make movie magic, and seeing Harrison Ford in his prime play this great, iconic, memorable character. And I don't think you're ever going to recapture that magic. Hell, even Spielberg and Lucas kind of struggled to recapture that magic in Crystal Skull. And I don't even think James Mangold can recapture that magic. I don't think anybody's ever going to recapture that magic. I think it's fine to just let this one go. Let Indiana Jones stay in the past. We'll always have these movies. We'll always have these memories. And for some people, it'll just be a trilogy, and they could just ignore the fourth and fifth. Or others will look at the fourth and fifth as part of the story and just see it as this one great long story about this one fascinating guy and his fascinating life, meeting different people, finding different treasures, and learning new things along the way. And, to me, I think it's fine to just let that franchise end And you know what? Maybe they should just create something new, which is what George Lucas and Steven Spielberg did. I mean, Steven Spielberg, when he was with George Lucas on vacation, he said, I want to direct a James Bond movie. And George Lucas said, I've got something better than James Bond. It's Indiana Jones, an archaeologist. That was an original character. And also, that's what George Lucas did with Star Wars. Originally, he wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie. But none of the studios would give him the rights, so he thought, okay, I'm going to make my own space movie. And maybe that's what filmmakers should do these days. I mean, obviously, with the way Hollywood works, that's probably not going to happen for a while. Hollywood is very dependent on nostalgic properties and IPs, but I mean, it would be nice to see someone create something new. Like, who knows? Maybe there's someone out there on the beach with their friends saying, man, I would love to direct an Indiana Jones movie. And then their friends going, I've got something better than Indiana Jones. Da-da-da-da-da. I mean, who knows? Crazier things have happened. But all in all, I'm just really thankful that we had Indiana Jones at all. As Dr. Seuss would say, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Indiana Jones, it's been real, it's been fun, and it was great to see you again. And you gave me the greatest treasure of all. You gave me illumination. Thank you, Indy. Rest well. Take care. And may you always have fortune and glory. So overall, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Not a perfect movie, maybe not a great movie, but a damn fun Indiana Jones movie. A damn fun adventure, and a great send-off to a great character. I say go see it. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 7.5, 8 out of 10. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. So, yeah, that's my verdict. Go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And that's my review. I am Lowell Reynolds. This is Lowell Loves Movies. And I hope you have a great day. And, of course, see you at the movies.